back, horror fans, cinephiles, Giallo enthusiasts, the people who read books. Whatever. Okay, so this is the next episode of Giallo Reads and the next part of cruising, beginning here with chapter 13, John Lynch. Um, so this is exciting. This is there's a bit that happens here, kind of. Some stuff that is different from the movie, but essentially we begin with John. He is in the apartment. He's about to be doing laundry, or he's in the middle of doing laundry. He has a run-in with his landlady who's like 80 years old. She kind of pesters him for the week's rent, and he pays it, feeling she's kind of aggressive, almost like she's got the janitor around the corner, and like if he doesn't pay it, then she's gonna have him, come throw his shit out. That's the impression John has. So he pays her, and he kind of reflects a little bit. He's starting to feel way more comfortable um in the job, the situation. He's he's no longer, he likes the idea of being someone else, and he's no longer like super uncomfortable. He mentions that, especially when he's got the knife, he feels comfortable. He's like remarking, it'd be nice to have a beer right now, it's so hot. Then he gets a phone call from Edelson, and he just remarked how he's like, yeah, even I don't even mind Edelson's calls, even when they're like late at night. It's just is what it is. And he's getting so comfortable, he answers the phone. He's like, hello, Captain. And Edelson is like, don't do that. Do not do that. You don't know who's listening. He's like, that's fine, no one's listening. And so he's like, what's up? Edelson tells him, you're moving. It's like, what do you mean? He says, we figured out he must be a student at Columbia. So I'm moving all 10 of the decoys, and we're going to just drown that area, and we're going to find him. And he's like, but I just paid a week's rent. And Edelson's like, so what? We'll increase taxes next year. Like, what, are you running out of money? He's like, no. And he's like, well, then don't bog me down with this trivia. Like, get your suitcase. You're moving. You're going to be going between these streets. Reach out to me when you're there so I know how to contact you. Cool. So he's moving out tomorrow, which kind of bumps him a little bit. Like I said, he was getting comfortable, but he also was actually starting to really, really like Dave. And when he gets off the phone, he starts reflecting on all these things like, well, this kind of sucks. Like, and he talks about how, against his previous judgment, like days earlier, several days before this, he never would have seen himself like actually hitting it off with a gay person and actually being friends with one and actually like being able to, talk about things. So that's cool. He's not just a total asshole through and through. And then he reflects on how he's actually been doing his assignment, and they're kind of tasked with just being present and trying to get the killer, supposedly, to come to them. And he said he's been so comfortable, he's actually been like cruising people. He's actually been like hitting them up. And he mentions how this person the other day, he found a nonchalant, casual way to talk to the person by asking to bum a cigarette from them. And the person was really aggressive. He says, what did I learn? He thought, what did it get me? Got me the fast brush, get lost, shithead, or whatever he said. Still, he had seen how nervous you feel making the first move. The other fellow was in control. He could see that now, and his assignment was to learn all he could about the gay life. Now, he knew you didn't have to get very nasty to shake a little nasty would do. So he was the one, John Lynch was the person who came up to Stuart Richards in the last chapter and asked to bum a cigarette. That's so cool. That's really cool. He didn't even know, Stuart Richards didn't know that this was an undercover cop who's actually looking for him. And John Lynch didn't know that he actually approached the killer. But he's saying that, he's gotten comfortable with it. He's even gone into the bushes about 6 times, and he always made an excuse to be like, oh, I gotta go. And he said, like, he could tell that it kind of worked in his favor in terms of him kind of playing it like he's a virgin at this, and he made up an excuse to get out of there. But working in that favor, it's like, oh, they probably know I was lying, but that can just be chalked up to I was nervous and I didn't have the balls to follow through with it. So very interesting. And then hears he hears Dave in the other room, and he decides, well, I guess I'm gonna have one last sit down with Dave. And so he grabs a couple beers and he walks over there. And as he gets to the door, right before he knocks, he hears a voice inside that's not Dave's. And this is so interesting. He gets jealous. He gets very, like, in his head, very aggressive and very just like, fuck this. What am I doing? Da, 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 kind of thing. And he's almost, he says he almost wanted to slam the 2 cans against his door and like just walk away. And then he like listens a little bit and he realizes, oh, that's not another person. That's the radio. And he calms down. Interesting. Very interesting. So he knocks on the door. Dave lets him in. He's like, hey, I brought some beers. Dave is immediately kind of like upset and just like, yeah, I finished the play. And he's like, oh, how was it? And he goes, it's shit. It's no good. I'm trying to be like the funny version of this guy, and Broadway already has the real person. So like, why would they need me? And he, Dave continues to tell him that he's given up. He's kind of given up on the play. And John is asking, well, like, maybe read it tomorrow. Maybe you'll feel differently. He's like, maybe, but it doesn't matter because Jack called, my roommate. He said the lead got like hepatitis or something, so they have to cancel the show. And Jack will be back tomorrow. And Jack told me, it's my turn to work. He was just off doing the show, so he's looking forward to relaxing. And this is where you get like kind of the line for line in the movie where I never told you about Jack and me. Know what he said when he called? Forget writing and find a job until his show reopens. Said it's my turn to work now. He intends to flop on the beach and turn nut brown. His very words. Damn, I was counting on having the rest of the summer. I could have finished by Labor Day. John's like, well, why didn't you just tell him that, you're on the brink? And he's like, yeah, Jack doesn't care. And then he goes on to say, again, like what is said in the movie about Jack is just kind of like, whatever, like doesn't really believe in Dave or the likelihood that he's actually going to break into Broadway or off Broadway or any of that type of thing. So then we get to Dave mentions, and this is another line that kind of comes up in the movie, is he brings up Bobby, who was the former tenant that was living in the spot where John is residing at this moment until tomorrow. And that is like, so first off, John mentions that the apartment is fairly split between like straight people, straight guys, I guess I should say, and gay guys. And the ones who kind of more or straight laced are usually kind of in the front. And then he describes them as the transient types are in the back, the ones who are going to be more coming and going and might be partying a bit. They're more on like the back side of the building. And Bobby was, I guess, like a renowned queer. Like everybody knew it, and he was just. It almost sounds like he was stereotypically like flamboyant kind. But Dave mentions that when Bobby would get upset, he would just kind of go out and come back the next day or, you know, late in the morning and just talk about like the things he had done to, you know, to let off some steam. And he mentions that he would go to a bathhouse and he would talk about how he blew like 3 dozen guys in 4 hours or 2 dozen guys in 4 hours, a lot. Anyways, and Dave says, I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but I'm saying I understand where he was coming from. John tells Dave that, well, I mean, maybe it's for the best. I'm actually supposed to be leaving next week. I'm supposed to be leaving as well. And he kind of tells a little fib to John, or John tells a little fib to Dave about why he makes up something about how something about the insurance company and he has to go to Chicago real quick, something about his like unemployment or something. And but he says, "What? But I still paid for the apartment for the next week, so I might come back. You know, we probably just hang out one last time." Which again, so interesting. Like he actually, you can tell the way he talks to Dave and how he talks about Dave in his mind that he actually really cares about this guy. He actually really likes this guy. This is what I mean by the book is way more suggestive in terms of John potentially liking Dave, them, you know, there actually might be something there versus the movie. It's more just, it is just more friendship. Although the movie does lightly suggest if you are paying attention, not saying, you know, most people aren't, but there's so many subtle things in the movie that um that John Forbes is kind of taking his assignment a little too seriously. Like he's really playing the part. There are there's a part where he goes off with someone when he's in the ramble under the bridge. Was it Joe Spinell's character is kind of like walking by, smokes a cigarette, looks back at him, and then this other guy comes by who is one of the he plays the killer at one point. He plays one of the victims because you know the movie shuffles that around a few times, and they go off, and then it just cuts to Al Pacino's character going to talk to Captain Edelson at like at a bar, and it's like, wait a minute, what happened there? Like you'd assume, okay, he probably went off with the guy, and then he probably made an excuse, but the movie is at least good about leaving a lot of things open for interpretation and leaving them ambiguous, and that's intentionally done because the movie suggests at the end maybe Al Pacino has gone a little crazy. Maybe he did start killing people. The way he catches Stuart Richards in the movie, he was very much the aggressor in that situation. And like, I mean, he was stalking him. But anyways, in terms of what, you know, his experience in the clubs, what you see in the movies, it's both more overt and ambiguous. But in the book, you actually get his thoughts, and it's slightly ambiguous, but it's more intimate in terms of how he thinks, how he feels. And again, the character is different. He doesn't have a girlfriend. Um, you get a little bit of his like backstory, the relationship he had with his uncle, going to parochial school, being in the army, him having run-ins with gays before, and he just feels like he's playing this facade of a homophobic man, you know. And in this chapter, it kind of feels like maybe that really is just a performance. But anyways, so they have their beers. He's saying like maybe we should get together after this, and Dave is like maybe we should just be good friends and just leave it at that. Hmm. Anyways, they say goodbye, and there's like a, you know, thanks for the beer. I think you thank you for the beer. And he goes, and falling back on the cover story Edelson had given him, just something to do with that insurance settlement I've been living on since the back injury kept me from working. The insurance company wants me to go out to Chicago and take another series of treatments. Tonight I see their claims inspector. We'll get together when I get back. And then Dave says, anything you say, sucking at his beer bottle. Or we could just be very good friends. Lynch didn't know what to say to that. Yeah, so he's kind of uncomfortable. He'd mentioned slightly earlier that like Dave was always kind of like almost hard to get. Like anything he might say, Dave would always kind of like say the opposite. So it was hard to agree with him. So like when he's complaining about Jack, he can't really like take Dave's side, so to speak, because Dave will just be like, nah, he's right. I'm just, I'm worthless type of thing. But then it's like he feels like he can't take Dave's side or he can't take Jack's side because he'll probably easily run into the confrontation there. But anyways, so he's uncomfortable a little bit, just doesn't really know what to say. Looks at his watch. He feels his knife in his pocket pressing against his groin. But yeah, he takes off. This is the last paragraph for this. Lynch couldn't look Dave in the eye. He just gave him a brief goodbye shrug, dipped his head, and ducked out the door. As he closed it, the last thing he heard out of Dave was a long, growling belch. You can say that again, Lynch thought. Interesting chapter. On to the next one. So, Edelson Notebook, chapter 14. This is probably my favorite Edelson chapter. I think for now, definitely, it's my favorite one. The final one, if I remember correctly, is good, but this is great. It's very professional. He's not complaining about John. He's stating how they solved this, and this is really good. I actually just want to make sure that I get this right. So he's talking about that they're going to start flooding the area tomorrow. First victim, Columbia professor. Timing of killings coincides with college's time off. Holidays, weekends. Last two fell during break between spring semester and start of summer session next week. Finally, what Manhattan area with a high concentration of homosexuals has not had a killing? Morningside Heights. So, killer is connected with Columbia, not faculty, but student. A young man's crime. He's kept it away from Columbia up to now because he lives around there. My men now checking Professor Peartree's class lists and will soon know every student who took his course during the past 3 years, dividing them into two groups, those registered for coming summer sessions, those not. If there's a killing during summer session, our time off killer is in the not registered group. If next 2 weeks are quiet, he is registered and will take extra precautions July 4th weekend. So cool. So cool. But yeah, he says, for now on, fill the streets with the victim types, tempt him to break his pattern of not trying anything up there. That's almost verbatim the entire chapter. There's like another 2 sentences after that or so, and there's like a sentence before it, but like that's the whole chapter. I can't really say anything because you just read it for you. It's great. It's really good. And I guess moving on. All right, and then we get to Stuart Richards chapter 15, and well, let's just jump right into it. So this begins with him sunbathing at Riverside Park, I believe is what it's called, and visually this sounds like the scene in the movie, minus Al Pacino, spying on him, or maybe not. So he's sunbathing there. He's thinking about how he's entering into the summer, and he's kind of kicking around that whole thought of like something his father had always said to him about like it's good to have something to do, a drive, otherwise you kind of fall into this state. And he's mentioned that earlier in the book, so he's kind of just going back to that where he's just like, what am I going to do? He mentions it's been 3 weeks since he last killed someone, and so he's keeps thinking about the knife in the suitcase, wondering why he didn't just get rid of it, wondering if you can even go back to a life before having committed murder. Then he notices more dark-haired gay guys around the park. He's just kind of like, where the hell did all these guys come from? Like it was never like this. And so this is your clue that the decoys are now flooding that area. And he describes one guy kind of like checking him out, sort of, and he's just like, ugh. Wondering if, I mean, it's probably obviously a decoy, but wondering if that is John Lynch. I mean, he's already technically had a run in with him, and so he didn't mention that the guy looked familiar. So maybe it's not, him, but most likely it is one of the decoys. He talks about he's been hooking up with this other girl, Phyllis, who is a neighbor. He kind of describes her as being similar to Barbara, uh, Bernard, Barbara, whatever, in terms of like just being flat chested and all that stuff. And she would put a pillow underneath her so her like ass would be more raised when he was going at it from behind. And he mentions like, oh, I shouldn't have broken that rule of like no neighbors, but bad days for rules, he thinks. And the thing that he keeps then bringing up is that like she was really dry. She was really dry, and that is like hurting him. Like it really chafed him up. And so he's kind of just like, ouch. He's thinking about his father. Um, he mentions that it would be nice to get a yes for once from his father. He's thinking he would like to ask his father if he could get money for a car, but he just knows that he's going to get another no. And he's sick of asking his dad for things, and he knows his dad is sick of being asked for things. But he's like, God, it would be nice if I just had a yes. And then there's a really cool line about how a car is really symbolic of just masculinity in terms of every guy should have one because every guy should have a drive and a car drives. And I'm like, oh, that's good. It's not like, over the top poetic, but I was like, oh, that's good. Um, then he kind of notices someone approaching him and he becomes really defensive, very homophobic, just like the hell do you want type of thing, throws a few slurs out, and the person is a cop and they're just like, what did you just say to me? And they're essentially like, you better drop that shit. I want you to like, I came over here to tell you to cover yourself up, like cover your, like not be bare chested. Like this is a park. We don't need people exposed. Well, it's funny because it's just his upper body, but still he's like, put your shirt back on, button it up. I'm going to be patrolling this area. And I don't want to come back here and see you with your shirt off again. So he's just like, oh, and he just like, and the cop leaves. He notices that like, in his head, he's like, I want to tell him this and I want to tell him that. But he realizes really quickly, he's like, he was holding his breath and he's like, was terrified. And it's just like, it's very indicative of the character to just be kind of like all bark, no bite. Well, I mean, there is some bite, but he needs a knife, in order to actually feel like he's powerful. But he starts freaking out about like, oh my God, what if I actually got busted because I had my shirt off? Like that would be just crazy. That would be stupid. He's thinking again about reaching out to his father. He might need to ask him for more money. He's just like, how do I mention it without bringing up why I really need it? Maybe I can lie and say I need it for books. I need it for new Shakespeare volumes. Oh, the one that I had before wasn't good. Blah blah blah. We need this one, which was written by a professor's friend. You know how it is, Dad. And he's walking home. I think he leaves books or he leaves something behind at the park, and he's already like walked up a hill and started walking, and he realizes it. And he just goes, "Fuck it, like whatever," leaves it behind. He As he's walking by, he kind of just walks into the street, almost, and like forces this guy to slam on the brakes, and it's just like, "Hey, what the hell, you freaking hippie!" And like the guy's got a car full of his family, and all his kids are just like, "Hippie, dirty hippie." And then he passes by a Puerto Rican family and he notices they're all happy. And then he starts thinking about how, like, happy family, that's the one thing I didn't have. And it just left me with a head full of resentment. Okay. And then he finally gets back. There's this bit where he talks to the old lady who's like the switchboard operator, and she says that he had messages, and he's like, okay, can I have the messages? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, they were calls, not messages. And he's like, okay, who called? And he was like, oh, some woman. It was like, hey, was it an older woman or was it a younger woman? She's like, well, that depends on what you mean by younger woman. He's just like, whatever. He's like, you're being obstinate. You're being stupid. So he goes up, he calls his dad's office. They answer and they're like, hello, Mr. Richard's office. And he hangs up. And then he starts looking for his father's home phone number. Calls, it rings 8-9 times, doesn't get an answer. He starts thinking about, well, I mean, that's wouldn't be like my father to just be in on a Sunday, but I can't imagine him also being out doing something on a Sunday, but whatever. And he brings up the thing again, like, I just need a yes. I just need a yes from him. Then he starts thinking about his mom. Maybe I should call my mom and mention, maybe I should use her to get to him in order for me to get money. I mean, it would be fair. She used to do that to me when I was a kid, use me to get to my dad. So he considers that, and all of a sudden the phone rings and he answers it, and a woman is on the other line. And you're not sure who it is. at first, but he recognizes the voice and it is pissing him off. After like a page or so, he drops the bombshell that it's Terry. Terry called him, and she's saying like, I left Philip and I put the baby up for adoption. And he really quickly starts guilt tripping her, like, why the hell would you do that? And she's like, what do you mean? You told me that you didn't think it was yours and you didn't want to like take care of it, and that was the only way. Like the only way Philip would take me back is if I agreed to name the baby Philip and then give it up for adoption. And he starts, throwing all this stuff like, you're a terrible mother, like how, like I wish I'd never met you, type of thing. And she's just like, you have no idea. And he's also trying to like guilt her, like that could have been my kid and you just got rid of it. And she's like, you have no idea what I went through. You didn't like bear the kid, you didn't birth the kid, you didn't hold the kid, you didn't feed the kid, you didn't look upon the kid, you didn't do any of the things I did. I did that for a week and then I had to get rid of it. And like, it it tore me up more than you can imagine because you never experienced any of those things. And so she calls him out. um then it's just kind of like petty, like, I wish I never met you, you're terrible, type of thing, all that stuff. And she's like, don't get yourself so worked up, you'll have an asthma attack. And then he starts like wanting to say something, she just hangs up. And he says something knowing that she's not even on the line anymore, she's not going to hear him. And then he has this thought, he's thinking about how he didn't really like, when he knew she was pregnant, he didn't take any steps to even consider like raising the kid, find out if the kid is his, for one. But like, he kind of immediately banished the like banished the thought, like didn't even want to think about it. And so he now is thinking about how he is a failure of a father, if that is his. And he compares himself to his own father, and he's thinking about how the cycle of trauma just continues. What my father did to me, I'm doing to my kid, and he'll probably do it to his kid, and so on and so forth. The merry-go-round spins. And then he's just getting really worked up. He's just really like, that bitch. What did like? How could she say that? And she thought she could tell me this, and she's telling, oh, don't get yourself so worked up, your asthma. And he's just really getting himself into a fit. And he starts thinking about control, and like, if he's in control, when he doesn't have control, he starts thinking about the knife again, the knife in the suitcase. That really helps him feel like he has control. Oh, if she was here right now, I would use that knife. And then all of a sudden he's just panting. He's just all of a sudden realizing the asthma is hitting him, and he's working himself up into an asthma attack, a panic attack, kind of. Definitely, I mean. And he starts thinking about the medicine that he needs for his asthma, and he gets it. And then I'm pretty sure he just throws it out the window. He's like, I don't need it, I'm in control. Who's in control here? Is the medicine in control, or am I in control? And then it just gets worse. And then he's like, oh my God, like freaking out. And he realizes he does have more medication in one of his drawers. And if he doesn't, then he's, like, are the drugstores even open on Sunday? And he starts going into this fit, and he's just completely in his mind. And all of a sudden, the door knocks, and it's Alfred. And Alfred's like, are you okay? What's going on? And then he kind of comes to and realizes his foot hurts, like his toe hurts. Maybe he kicked his dresser, and his knuckles are like raw, like he's just been punching either the wall or something. And this makes him realize, holy shit, I need to get a hold of myself, because I'm like having lapses of losing control. Like, I don't know what I did. I literally have no memory of what just happened. So that's starting to scare him. Like, oh my God, I'm capable of losing control to the point that I don't even know what happened. Alfred comes in. He tells him about, how he's just freaking out. He needs his asthma medication. It's in this drawer. Alfred fixes the dresser, pulls the medication out of the drawer. He says, I need water. Alfred goes and gets some water. He's taking the medicine, and Alfred's like got his arm around him, rubbing his shoulder, and Stuart sits down on the edge of the bed. Alfred sits down on the edge of the bed, and he keeps kind of holding him. And there's a few times where he's like, oh, poor baby. He says things like that, which kind of condescending, but he also means well. So he's helping him. And when he starts feeling better, and Stuart has this thought of like, I kind of like, it's nice to, you know, I mean, like, to feel like you're in control and everything, but it's nice every once in a while to just feel like someone's taking care of you. And he is reminded of how his father used to basically do exactly what Alfred is doing, you know, when he was younger, when he was a little boy. He's like, God, this feels nice. And then he kind of starts tripping this, like, you know, am I gay? You know, and he's having these homophobic thoughts, like he's then kind of a little uncomfortable. Like I need to kind of break away from Alfred. And Alfred's like, do you, you know, he kind of stretches a little bit, and he's like, do you feel better? And then he smiles, and again, that damn smile, that damn smile that goes back to all of his victims, and like, what the hell are they smiling about? And the whole, you know, the third man thing. What does that smile mean? And he's like, you probably think I'm, you know, a crybaby because you served in Vietnam, and here I am crying about, or like, you know, getting upset about this. And Alfred says this line, which I thought was really great. I wrote it down. He says, the pressures of the moment are sufficient to the need. And then, well, I should actually keep these on. And then Stuart asks him, when you look at me, what do you see? Like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm. What do you see when you look at me? Do you see straight or gay? And Alfred's like, I'm not going to answer that. It's he goes down to this whole. He gives us this speech, which I really like the speech. I'm going to actually read it, but he's just like, I will not answer that question for you. That is a question that you must answer yourself. The fact that you're asking it is a little telling, but another person should not answer that question for you. That is for you. And what he says is, you're asking me your questions now, Alfred said. Shows you knew there was something there, some interest I had in you that wasn't the usual interest. Even so, I'm not going to answer you. I can't tell you what you are, can't and won't. Like so many your age, you could go either way, depending on whom you meet, when, where. You mean I've got the potential? Stuart said. Yes, Alfred said, but that's not telling you much. A lot of guys do. I'm just saying I'm not going to be the one to push you over the edge. It's not a life I'd care to play salesman for. You can live it discreetly, maybe even with some dignity. But if you're gay, the cards are certainly stacked against you to begin with. I won't push anyone into it. Someone did me. I've never forgiven him. I don't care what excuses he made for himself. I'm not making them for me. And then he says, but I'm only asking whether you think, and then he cuts him off and says, you're only asking me to pin a label on you, Alfred said, and I won't do it. Find your own labels. You could be a latent or maybe a pseudo homosexual. Their problems are something else, but they come out as homosexual panic. Sometimes a guy can dabble and be done with it. Other times the result lasts a lifetime. I, okay. I don't know how like accurate that is, because I'm a straight guy. This was written by a straight guy. I would like someone who is gay to weigh in on that if they're like, wow, that actually is powerful, or if they're just like, that's crap. That's crap written by a straight man who thinks he understands the homosexual experience in America. I don't know. It, as I said, I thought it was good, but I will point that out that I said, who am I to say that? Again, Gerald Walker is a straight man, so how accurate is it? I don't know. I don't know if he talked to anyone and came up with that. Don't know. But I do think it's really good. And I think it's really good for the character to just be like, I'm not here to recruit you. I'm not here to, you know, like it's a whole thing. And like to push you into that is to say you are going to live a certain life, and it's going to be hard, especially 1970 in America. So Alfred won't answer, and Stuart is getting frustrated at this, and he essentially accuses Alfred of, well, you remember what you're doing right now, what you did months ago when you were being like this and this. And again, remember, we still don't know exactly what happened with Alfred months ago. Did they kiss? Did they cuddle in bed? Did they do sexual acts on each other? We still don't know, but we know something happened. And ever since that happened, along with Terry walking out on him, this sent Stuart Richards over the edge. I mean, again, you have to remind you, he was already fucked up to begin with. It's not like, you know, being a gay guy turned him into a maniac, or a woman rejecting him turned him into a maniac. This guy was clearly fucked up to begin with, and he did not have the emotional mental faculty to cope with these things in his life. Just need to remind that in case people are trying to be, thinking that the book is trying to say something that I don't think it is. So Stuart accuses him, and Alfred is just like, I'm gonna leave. I'm not gonna talk to you right now. This is not a time for this. Like, you need to kind of calm down. He doesn't really say it like that, like calm down. He just says, this isn't the time. This isn't the time to talk about this. This isn't the time. Which, again, really good, really smart for him to not be kind of like accusing Stuart, like, you're crazy. You need to calm down. It's very much just like, hey, take the time you need. We can have this talk, but we shouldn't do it now. You're just not in the right frame of mind right now. So he walks out, and Stuart starts running in his head like, if I had that knife, I would have killed him. And like, like, who does he think he is? Like doing that to me, and then trying to act like he's not trying to recruit me when he really clearly is, even though he's, he can say it to himself and say it to me that that's not what he's trying to do, when that's exactly what he's trying to do. And then he thinks of his son again, and he thinks about how his son is going to, live a miserable life, and how they're both going to just live miserable lives and suffer silently, alone, thinking about themselves, thinking about each other, about how, like, my father wasn't there for me. And Stuart's essentially going to be thinking, my father wasn't there for me. I'm not there for my son. His kid is going to think, my father's not there for me. The cycle will just repeat itself. And then the chapter ends with Stuart getting the suitcase ready to go out for another kill. So the book is really engaging. Like, it's crazy because the movie is very different. They're similar in like setting out what the plot is going to be, but they are so different in the execution. And I kind of would like to see the book actually as a movie. It's just probably will never happen. The fact that the movie was even adapted in 1980 is pretty freaking crazy. But looking at it, what is it now, almost 45 years later, it's not going to happen. It's way, the book is way too insert whatever word you want here. You've been listening, you can probably formulate your own opinion. I won't tell you what to think, but I will just say that I don't think the likelihood of this book being made today is, I don't think the likelihood is very high. Anyways, thank you for watching this next segment of Giallo Reads. If you're still interested, I will see you next time for the follow-up episode covering another 3 chapters of Cruising. We are very close to the end. I think there are 5 chapters left, so the next episode will be 3 chapters. The one after that will be 2. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo. If nothing else, I'll see you next time.